When I got here to USF, our MBA students were taking one quantitative class in the core, and they were essentially no electives at all. And so over time, as we got demand from students, we started to add electives. But it was clear to me that it was still a little bit too much classroom. And so we started to augment the electives with case studies. But the thing that really sort of kind of lit our program on fire was adding a projects class that help students pull together both mathematical and statistical tools that they'd learned in classes, software skills that they had learned in those classes, but then also new math that they had to learn to kind of go where the projects led them, and oftentimes new software techniques or tools. And you know, so much of what our business analysts, data scientists, and everyone in between does these days is self-teach. There's a sense of kind of the profession that involves data and models to be very much a constant graduate school. And so part of what we're trying to do is prepare our students to enter that world. And part of what we're trying to do is prepare them with experiences and stories and bumps and bruises that are going to help them both land their first job and be successful at it.
In administration, we're sort of segmented in most instances
Right.
from the academic mission. And do you have any thoughts if I were sitting at Colorado University in Denver, how would I find a faculty member or a student to help me with the project?
Um, so this is from the perspective of the administration rather than the perspective of the faculty, just to
Yeah.
confirm, right? Uh, I think first and foremost, I would look for faculty that are doing a good job of placing students, and so your career office is a great contact point for that. Just say, which kind of faculty are hands-on, involved, connected with the student job search, and connected with industry in general. That's your first kind of crucial breadcrumb as an administrator, kind of looking for faculty that might be interested in this stuff, is ones that are already organically gravitating towards that interface between university life and the business world.
Right.
Um, Secondly, I would look to our development officers around, hey, who are our people that you've been talking to who have project ideas? Because it's something that we're experiencing pretty commonly is that as our fundraising folks go out and talk to alums would like to give back in some way. And the ways that they typically talk about are hiring students, hiring graduates, coming back and giving talks or being available for informational interviews and doing projects. So those are kind of the, in a way, I'm looking for people that are already trying to touch that interface point, both faculty and alums,
Right.
as a place to kind of get into it from an administration perspective.
How do we as administration gear our projects in an appropriate way to make them relevant and meaningful for students?
Um, I would say that it depends on the instructor that you're partnered with.
Okay.
And so, give a couple of cases there. One case is this. The professor has a slot in their class for a student project. It's X weeks long, 3 weeks long, 5 weeks long, whatever it is, for a student project. And when it's as sharply defined as that, you're best geared to a relatively tight and narrow problem statement, and with doing as much of the data prep for them as you can. Conversely, in my class, where both the time span and the problem description are more open-ended, that's a case where, in a sense, kind of being able to point and say that's north, as opposed to saying I need you to get to this longitude and this latitude, and helping them through their interaction with you refine that sense of what the true objective of the project is where a lot of the learning is for them. And weirdly, although it requires more time from the project sponsor, it's sometimes I've heard from people that students have helped them think it through. Folks like you guys who are kind of keeping a list of projects and are kind of keeping a sort of a sense of what's important but not urgent,
Yep.
you're two legs up. And as other people that are watching this or hearing this, I want to encourage you to start with that idea, because it's much harder to respond to a cold call saying, "Hey, we're interested in doing a project. Do you have something for us?" Where you're starting from scratch, and you think there must be 100 things, but in that moment, you're so busy, you're so sidetracked that you can't come up with something in that moment. The learning is always greater, and the benefit to both the students and the client is always more substantial if the problem is real and relevant,
Hmm.
as opposed to, well, yeah, we'd kind of like to have somebody look at that. It'd be nice if they came up with something, but if they don't, who cares? Because the students sense that, the faculty senses that. And the last thing you want them to do is come back with an academic presentation. Um, Unless your only goal is to is the recruiting side, and then you get a look at some students that way, and there's definitely some small benefit. But when the problem is real and relevant to your business, um, everybody steps up their game.
Right. Yep.
The students have all the skills, I mean, all the energy, and all the sort of hours available to them, uh, that your young shortstops do. The professors have less of that natural talent and less of that natural time available to them, and have to bring kind of wisdom and experience to it. And the administration, they're like the general manager. They don't have any of those things. They don't have time to be close to the problem. They don't have time to live with it and work through it. But they have the relationships to put people in place.
Right.
It takes that whole that takes that whole team to cover that role.
Yep.
I think at the core of it is to have as good an understanding of the class of problems that a particular professor's class or degree program is good at tackling. I mean, in a way, guys, working with you guys has really raised the question of how much coding skill do my students need to have, do new MBAs need to have in order to make a contribution? And you guys have been able to kind of meet us halfway on that. And I've had other clients who were just amazed, where my students had much more technical capability than their in-house. To our earlier conversation, I think it helps with if you understand kind of where their students are going and what kinds of roles they're landing up in.
That's a good point.
And that's where your career office can be really, really helpful. I want to reiterate that although we had such a tiny group last year, we would really love to have a project from you guys this year, and I expect to have a group. I mean, I'm expecting to have 15 to 20 students and 4 to 6 projects.
Wow. Maybe 50 people watching this thing at regional, so I think we can also extend our set of people interested if we can start getting those problems defined. So.
Well, that'd be fantastic. And for those that are outside the Bay Area, let me just kind of share with you that we have on a couple of occasions over the last 3 years had clients from outside the region, and that's been a little bit more of a challenge, but it's also been equally educational to teaching my students how to develop relationships through Skype, and teaching them to really articulate clearly data requests, because they can't go stand at anybody's desk without getting on an airplane. And so we see more and more of the demand for people who are comfortable working in multi-site remote project teams. And so we have no fear of that, because that can be educational for us as well. Let me know how this thing goes, and then we'll talk again in early November.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That sounds great.
Have fun down there, too.
Yeah, that'll be perfect.
That's the home of the 3-for-1. Yeah. The 3-for-1 happy hours. So have a good trip, and we'll talk soon. This was fun, you guys.